Xramlrac's justice. Endrith felt the cool breeze on his face and through his short hair as he walked through the crisp autumn morning. The chill day told him of winter's coming, with the sharpness of the air, and the golden leaves that had left their arboreal homes to settle on the ground below. He remembered how he used to ride down this path through the woods, to an opening with a clear view of the sea. How many winters had passed since? Over a dozen, at least. A short time for one of the white-haired Elthari race that could live for over 2 centuries. Since the violent fall of Athanor, to the fanatical followers of Xramlrac, the Red God, the priests of Xramlrac had come with their acolytes and imposed a new order. Endrith had been the son of a lord, but in the new order there were no lords. Everyone was to be equal, as Xramlrac demanded. Most of Endrith's family had been taken away or killed. However, Endrith was a survivor. He gladly, or so he showed, adopted the new god and the new order, rejecting the fallen High King and the traditional gods of his people. Endrith no longer lived in a manor, but in a humble hut. He no longer feasted on meat, but on seeds and oats. His face had begun to hollow out from hunger, and he was made to cut the beautiful long white hair from his head short, just as with every good follower of Xramlrac. He knew he was still handsome, as did the beautiful, and also now short-haired Celia, who accompanied him on this morning's promenade. They had been open lovers for months now, as the new order allowed open relationships and even polyamory. Endrith had enjoyed taking different lovers, and it seemed that he was the only man in the village who the women flocked to. From the bushes, suspicious eyes watched the 2 lovers on their morning walk. They watched with a vile bitterness at what one has and what one cannot have. Soiforith was a homely youngster who had never caught the attention of the opposite sex. He had always hated Endrith for this. Endrith had been taught to sing, recite poetry, and speak in a charismatic fashion, thanks to his aristocratic education, which heightened his skills of seduction. Soiforith cared not for learning songs or sweet talk, yet he despised those that did. Unlike Endrith, he came from peasant stock and had grown up in a more humble environment. Since the destruction of Eltes and the coming of the new order, everyone had been made equal, and Endrith and Soiforith were both now the same. Or were they? Were they really? Certainly, Soiforith's diet had also diminished since the new order. But so what? What did it matter to him? This was one of the many sacrifices the new god demanded for the sake of equality. Equality. Soiforith loved the idea. He had become a fanatical follower of Xramlrac, and he had become an avid instrument in making his village equal. He gave the priests of Xramlrac any information they needed on who held more wealth and where it was hidden. Soiforith always paid attention to these things, spying for details from his humble dwelling. Some of those Soiforith pointed out to the new authorities would resist and be killed. Others had been taken away to be educated in the ways of Xramlrac. And so they should. Others, like Endrith, gave in and became equal with Soiforith. Or were they? If they were equal, then why was Celia not being shared equally between them? Or fair Lufrith? Or heavy-bosomed Trina? Soiforith stewed on these things, as he watched the couple embrace in passionate kisses and fall to the grass. There was violent knocking on the door, waking Endrith from his sleep. Bang! Bang! He looked over and saw Celia was awake as well, moaning in irritation. Bang! Bang! "Hold on!" Endrith yelled as he slipped on his trousers and walked to the door. The night had been one of bliss, as Endrith and Celia lost themselves in each other's love. Sleep came easily, enveloping them as it brought them away from the cruel struggles of life and into the realms of euphoric dreams. This painful awakening was most unwelcome. Bang, bang. Endrith threw a soiled robe over his body, for the silken cloth of his comfortable youth was gone. "Wait here, my love," he whispered to Celia, and picked up a stone he had placed beside what he currently called a bed. The new order had taken away anything that could be used as a weapon from the people, including axes, farm tools, and even eating utensils. A rock, however, could always be used against an adversary, almost as efficiently as a small knife. Bang, bang. Endrith slowly moved through the darkness towards the banging door. "Hold on," he called out, and poised himself to strike at any that offered him violence from the other side. As he opened the door, a whirlwind of blows caught him. Red-cloaked acolytes of Xramlrac kicked in the door, sending him hurtling backwards. When he landed on the dirt floor, they began beating him relentlessly. Their heads were shorn of hair, and they had vengeance in their eyes, Celia screamed, only to be silenced by a blow across the jaw. After a vicious beating that left Endrith soaked crimson in his own blood, his limp form was seized by the arms and pulled up to hang. One of the intruders stepped forth and read aloud a report at the top of his lungs, forcing the air with his excited voice. "You are charged for being unequal by the standards of your beauty. You will be taken and adjusted by the will of Xramlrac. Everyone must be equal." "Everyone must be equal," the other acolytes shouted into the limp man's face before they dropped him and continued the beating. One blow that struck his head knocked out any consciousness left there, and darkness enveloped his eyes. They beat the beautiful man until they were themselves exhausted and stopped for breath. Their work here done, they grabbed him by his bloody robes and dragged him away. A week later, Soiforith walked through the village. The skies were cloudy and gloomy, reminding everyone of the cold and rains that lay ahead. Soiforith did not mind a little rain to soften the earth on his morning promenade. Along his way he found Endrith sitting on a stool outside his hut. What little hair he previously had was missing, having been torn from his scalp. His face had been scarred. His foot must have been crippled, and he leaned in his seat on a cane. Soiforith smirked, satisfied as he watched Endrith trying to eat a heel of stale bread, but having a difficult time of it, as most of his teeth were now missing. Soiforith's smirk blossomed into a smile. Walking up to Endrith, he said with a touch of mischief in his tone, "Good morning, comrade. Everyone must be equal." "Everyone must be equal," Endrith answered through his broken mouth as he sat there suffering. Pleased with himself and his service to Xramlrac, Soiforith kept walking. Around him on the street, villagers moved to and fro as they prepared for the day's work. The guards had opened the storage hall, and the peasants bustled in and out to pick up their farm tools. The new order would not allow them to keep their tools at home, because, remember, they could be used as weapons, and so had to be held communally, and not by the community. A few steps ahead of him, Soiforith saw Celia, pretty as always, except for the bruise on her jaw. How did that happen? She carried an empty basket on her way to her daily labors. Soiforith approached her with a friendly smile on his face. "Good morning, Celia." She gave him a look of annoyance and moved on, ignoring his greeting. What is this? Why would she not acknowledge him? Endrith was no longer a suitable mate for her. He was nothing but a pathetic cripple. Why would she not turn to Soiforith? Everyone must be equal. That night, as Soiforith settled in the pile of hay that was his bed, there came a loud knocking on the door. Bang! Bang! Soiforith jumped up in fear. Bang! Bang! Who could this be? Bang! Bang! Soiforith snuck up to the door. He recognized the sound, but surely these could not be the acolytes of Xramlrac coming for him in the night. He was one of Xramlrac's most loyal followers. Bang! Bang! Soiforith rubbed his eyes, and with a quivering wrist he slowly moved towards the door latch. Before he could open it, the door burst apart, and in stormed the red-cloaked acolytes, who instantly began beating him. "No! No!" he cried. "I've been good! I've been equal!" An eager fist struck across the nose, breaking it and filling his nostrils with blood. One clearly more equal than the others walked in and placidly observed the violent thrashing taking place. When Soiforith's cries weakened for lack of both air and hope, the one that was more equal unfurled a scroll. Without even looking at the words, he shouted at the top of his lungs, "You are charged for being unequal by the standard of being able to eat better than another. Your teeth are superior to his. You are guilty of trying to rise above your equals at their expense. You will be taken and adjusted by the will of Xramlrac. Everyone must be equal." "Everyone must be equal," the acolytes cried, as they dragged poor Soiforith out of his hut, kicking and screaming into the night.